All right, so first, thanks everyone for coming in. My name's Tim Prendergast. I'm CEO and co-founder of Evident. Don't hold the C-level title against me. I'm a carbon-based life form with InfoSec chops, and I can prove it. But we'll talk about that after the fact. The good news for you is this is not a product pitch. Who wants to hear a product pitch? All right, you're going to have to go next door. This is more about what we've learned not only as a company that was formed by some of the biggest Amazon customers coming together to solve a challenge for other Amazon customers, but also something that we've learned as a company that operates natively on Amazon. We want to share some of the framework with you of how you can actually approach automating security operations in Amazon. I will tell you, I am not going to give you a silver bullet that you can take out of here and go plug into your business and look awesome. The reason is those are extremely opinionated presentations, and I can give those, but they don't work for every business. And so you always have to do a little bit of DIY, choose your own adventure, and hopefully we'll prepare you for some of that today. I used this slide at reInvent last year with one slight difference. If you can pick it out, raise your hand. It's underlined and italicized, made it easy. Of all the changes catalyzed by cloud, security is the most exciting thing to me. And it's not only the most exciting thing because it's so radically different from what we did in the data center, it's still the most exciting thing 6 or so months on from reInvent because it only gets better as you get more mature in the cloud. And in fact, I have an anecdote where a customer and a friend of ours told us, we're taking over our data center security team. This is the cloud security team. And we're trying to backport some of these cloud security practices to the data center because we feel like we're flying blind in our data center now. That's a pretty powerful statement. That just basically tells you the accessibility to data and the information you can retrieve in a programmatic fashion in the cloud is extremely powerful and put to work for you. And so you got to figure out how to put it to work for you. The good news is your role is really well defined. And if there's one thing that Amazon has done exceptionally well, it was being very clear from when you signed up what you have to do to be successful in the cloud. This cool orange line, which is Amazon Orange, by the way, delineates kind of where your responsibility in Amazon's is. And there's a saying like Amazon handles security of the cloud, meaning that underlying infrastructure. That's all magic rabbits out of magic hats, and you guys don't really have to worry about it. If you're doing compliance, you can pull in their NDA reports for compliance and use those as a basis for your auditors to look at. But really, the customer does, the forklift is not an ironic image, the heavy lifting above, right? And this is basically everything in a CRUD-style relationship. Anything you can create, you can update, you can destroy, whatever you do through the API is on you as a customer to manage and secure. That's an important understanding for you to take on because it really well positions your thinking for how you need to approach the cloud. Because remember, it's not just we're throwing an application in the cloud and we're done. We're creating software-defined infrastructure at various levels, from the network to the identity, and there's a lot of ground to cover for security in there. The thing that's compelling about this is that the paradigm shifted away from what was a legacy security model, right? We had data centers, finite walls, put a big perimeter around them, call it a day. In a data center, if you had 1,000 servers yesterday and 100 today, you were robbed. Like someone jacked a whole bunch of your servers. In the cloud, that is a typical day in the cloud for most customers. You'll have 100 servers today, 1,000 tomorrow, 10,000 the next day, and 50 the next day after that. Your resources may balloon and contract dynamically without humans interacting with it. That creates a challenge for traditional security mechanisms because a lot of our capabilities and technology were built around the idea that I know what my infrastructure looks like and I can put security perimeters and controls around that. How many people here have had to buy some kind of agent licensing or size and appliance for your Amazon environment? Anybody? So the challenge with that whole model is it assumes that you are going to pick a finite size approach, and then you go through these technology cycles and reprocure security when your company grows or invests in new projects. How many people here are going to do more than 2 or 3 new projects in the cloud this year? It's the majority of the audience. There's a dramatic acceleration that's happening, and the one thing that we can rely on is that we have the central control plane API in the cloud that we never had in the data center, and gives you a security advantage you didn't have before. We actually have unified identity, storage, network, regionality, even metadata about the servers we're launching, so we can better understand our security posture in the cloud at all times, as opposed to when we do a quarterly audit or when someone anxious to go to the data center and count the racks and count the servers that we had there. The problem historically has been the security industry is not the most cloud-forward industry. A lot of our technology is dated and makes assumptions about where you're going to operate, right? You have host-based agents, which are a great technology for protecting servers and containers, but literally do nothing for S3. They don't do anything for elastic load balancing. They don't do anything for a lot of the services you engage in the cloud. If I were to ask how many people are using just EC2 today and nothing else, one hand went up. You, sir, get a prize. Most people are using an amalgam of services to actually create the experience they want for their users. And protecting that means you have to go beyond the expectation that security had. And the expectation for security today that's different is you have to embrace the cloud values so that you can actually take advantage of all the capabilities that are available to you. We can do some illustrations because I like drawing pictures. You got a bunch of C3 compute instances. You're sitting there cranking away doing some processing. Why am I only putting host level protections here when that processing doesn't live on my ephemeral nodes, right? My processing data is stored in S3. It's kept in an RDS database, put into S3 for object storage. My solution of protecting the workload when it's in process doesn't protect the workload at rest or in storage or when it's distributed for resiliency. And it's a failing that a lot of people sometimes bump into. This was very common in the data center because that lower layer was all just servers. I mean, your EMC array, big bunch of machines that are running Unix or Windows or whatnot. You can go deploy host-based agents onto those control nodes. It actually works fine. At the same time, virtual appliances run into some scalability issues. And the reason I asked that question earlier is the first generation of virtual appliances that were brought in for security into the cloud were virtualized firewalls, virtualized load balancers, and proxies, which are pretty common models from 20 to 30 years ago. But the difference today is that they have a finite size. So if you load an appliance or load some software like a pfSense firewall or something into an AMI and you launch it and you route traffic through it or to it, it'll handle the capacity for what our expected infrastructure size is very well. Where it falls down is we have an elastic event and all of a sudden we've tripled our infrastructure because we got slashed audited or we got popular, or our YouTube video with our horse mask was really cool. And we've just killed our appliance, right? Because I sized it to handle maybe 3 gigabit of traffic, 30 gigabit, depending if those are 10 gig instances or not, and I just threw 90 at it. This is the quintessential self-imposed DDoS in security. And this is why a lot of times you find the security architects from Amazon and other companies telling you, you have to look at your cloud architecture and the decoupling of it, and you have to actually make smart decisions about how you're going to route traffic. The very first thing you do is think about my traffic flows and my choke points, and make sure that we don't basically fall into a pit of our own making. And in general, and by the way, Elasticsearch is accidentally up there. It was supposed to come later. In general, too much information is flowing. You get all kinds of telemetry data from the cloud, CloudWatch, you get CloudTrail, Config, a number of different assets, including Inspector. And then you get all of your infrastructure data from like your Chef, Puppet, or Ansible. And you get your monitoring data from your Nagios or Zabbix or CloudWatch. And even us at Evident are guilty of generating a lot of data on the security side of the house. And people generally today just like to shim that stuff into systems that are made to aggregate data. The fundamental problem here is that it doesn't become actionable at this point. This data just sits, and we fall into almost like a SIM-like behavior, which is I have my data, it's sitting in this big pile of all this other data, and now I have to have really trained individuals go through and dig out what's important. And fundamentally, that's a challenge. How many people here are having no problem hiring cloud security people, like you have them coming at you in droves? Nobody? It's a fundamental problem in the business. Humans scale to a finite point. And the automobile industry is a great example of this. You can make cars at a finite pace, and then you turn to robots, which is basically the embodiment of automation in the physical world. I was fortunate enough to visit the Tesla factory in Fremont a couple months ago. They're ramping up their business from doing thousands of cars a month to try and do 500,000 cars a year now that the Model 3 has been announced and started taking reservations. There's no way they could hire enough people in that area to actually build vehicles. They, however, have invested in millions and millions of dollars of the robots and have automated the infrastructure so that people are spot checking and evaluating how the robots are performing. Tons of telemetry comes in, they evaluate it. But autonomously, a lot of what their expectation of building product is happening without human intervention. And that's a very powerful analogy to what happens in security when you're operating infrastructure in the cloud. Because if you don't do this, you end up like this. Everyone feel like this sometimes? Security people hate nothing more than pounding your head into the brick wall over and over and over until someone else gets it, right? So you got to kind of take some of the control back into your hands. And the good news is we're in a very fortunate place today in that we have the DevOps movement that preceded a lot of this DevSecOps movement. And what that means is People are sharing openly their successes and failures in automation at the infrastructure or server build level, but we haven't gotten there in the security level. The benefit to this whole equation is, since all of you are here and listening, the more we imitate that DevOps model in the security world and get open about our sharing rather than kind of being very concealed about what we're doing, the faster we're all going to move ahead. And the question of why we want to move ahead is, why are you automating in the first place? We are 1 million, and this is an old number, 1 million security professionals short in the business. That is probably, I would guess, half of the real number, because if you had 1 million more people, I think everyone would still be overwhelmed. But that's just to get to equilibrium. And this thing is accelerating away from us. So you have to think, like, if my bench is empty now and I'm just putting more workloads and more stuff in the cloud, like all of you just attested to by raising your hands, automation is a critical asset here. Anyone familiar with what alert fatigue is? Right? How many of you ignore pages that come in from a certain system because you know it's kind of like, it'll be there tomorrow, right? A bunch of people. Alert fatigue is the biggest problem in security as well today, because we generate more security information in the cloud than we did in the data center. And on the good side, you get a lot of visibility and a lot of capability out of that. On the bad side, there's more alerts, and there's the same amount of people. So what happens is you fall into the risk of humans fielding these alerts, ending up ignoring the alerts. So no matter how good your process is, no matter how much you've invested in compliance or maintaining corporate policy, you will fail as human beings doing this. And we've seen the best companies on the planet with some of the best people fall on their face when it came down to fielding the amount of telemetry data and alerting coming in from not only their security systems, but security piled on top of their operational monitoring and their user experience monitoring and all these other various aspects of their telemetry. So you have to think, not only am I investing in my future to make sure I'm not getting killed by alerts, I'm also investing in the future of my entire organization, because if you burn out and go away, who's going to come take that spot and seeing what just happened to you, right? This is actually kind of like business DR in practice at a human level. I think everyone will agree to this statement. Infrastructure and software delivery are accelerating at an unprecedented pace. How many people here are engaged in a continuous integration or continuous deployment practice? That's 75% of the audience or more. How many people are here in a waterfall that's a every 2-week deployment? There's a good handful of people too. So between 2 weeks and on commit, we have a majority of the audience, the majority of the people here, that your peers, in this high-speed, high-velocity game of delivering customer experiences. The challenge with that is delivering them securely, so that security is not this big blockade, right? You never want security to be this thing that is a hurdle to jump over to get a product to a customer. Historically, that's been what security's been, right? When we talk about security operations, it tends to be, go through my checklist, stop, your product waits, I gotta spend a week so I can get to this and go through and check all these boxes off and then let you release it. And by the time most companies have gone through that checklist, there's another software release ready to go. And you all just proved that for me. Even if you're on a 2-week delivery, that 1 week is already, you're now in QA and testing, you're ready to push that product that following week. In a CI/CD environment, you cannot stop every check-in build to have a security person go audit the thing. It's impossible. So you kind of say, why automate security in this situation? And ride your quarter horse, and this is like being the white knights of security. You get on a quarter horse and your DevOps team's in a Ferrari. You lose that battle instantaneously, right? This is not even funny. I could have put a picture of a Prius. It doesn't matter what's on the left side over there. Everyone just checking out the Ferrari. Get in the passenger seat of the Ferrari and go fast with the team. If your DevOps team is moving really fast, the first step in this entire process is get in the passenger seat. Security people do not like to hear that. I didn't like to hear it originally. We don't control the ball anymore. We are a part of the team. We are helping the team move the ball forward at a very rapid pace. But I can't say, no, you cannot do that. Because ultimately, the business is accountable to your investors, to the board, to yourselves and your stockholders to deliver value to customers really quickly. And if they don't, someone else will do it for you and take your business away, right? So now the answer is not, do I do this very rapid iteration delivery of features? Do I have to do security as an enabler and part of that process? But the question is, how do I do it? Step one is just get in that passenger seat. So a lot of you are like, well, where's this all going? You kind of pick your flavor of what you want to call it. We've had a bit of an identity crisis in the industry. A whole bunch of people see the same thing and say the same thing, but we all just branded it differently. If anyone's familiar with Heartbleed and every other exploit that now has a cutesy name and a website, I think it's part of the same failing where everyone's kind of crying for attention and saying, check this out, we have a cool new move. Where the rubber really hits the road in this is, DevSecOps, I think, is where we're all going to congeal as organizations in the industry. Rugged DevOps started by Gene Kim, who did the Phoenix Project, and Josh Corman from Sonatype, and a number of other individuals. We were fortunate to participate in that. That's really about building resilient security practice. DevSecOps is about integrating security into your product lifecycle and actually helping the product lifecycle go faster. Agile security, and more recently, even Amazon's been pushing kind of secure by design. These are all the same thing. I don't care what you guys call it. What I care about is that you kind of embrace it, because you end up saying, where does security belong in my organization? And there's two choices. You put the knights in the white tower and they look down on the rest of the village and they only come down when there's something important to do. And usually it's like, run in, kill a whole bunch of people, including half the villagers, because you're kind of furying through trying to fix something, and then ride back to the tower and think you did an awesome job. And then there's actually being part of the team building the product and delivering real value in security. This whole talk to this point has been preparing you in a mindset. I haven't told you a whole lot about security operations at Amazon yet, because we're preparing a mindset of security operations, especially automated ones, will fail in the cloud if you are not part of the team delivering the technology and infrastructure. So not there. I think this is the last kind of preachy slide. If DevOps is building value for your business, security is building trust. As consumers, I know everybody sitting here goes and checks out their file sharing service or their social network security policies and settings. We've been trained as consumers because mostly all of our data has been lost already. But there's a pessimistic view, right? But you really get in there and you say, if we're going to build value for customers and we build trust from customers, customers will select our solution first in the industry. That's because customers who are individuals or businesses need trust and value in a very uncertain time on the internet right now. And it's an uncertain time because if you follow the Verizon data breach reports or any other independent analyst views of security, they look pretty morbid. Traditionally, a security operation will respond somewhere around 90 to 200 days after an exploit or an attack has happened and been successful. Those attacks happen in 4 hours to a week of time frame. So compare now the velocity of your cloud deployment and the time individuals have to verify everything is perfect against an attacker who only has to find one thing wrong. And it doesn't have to be your company. They will walk through every single company here until they find the one that's broken. And that's just a numbers game that we lose as defenders because we're so human-centric in the security practice. And that's really the point of this whole talk, is that we have to get to a situation where we're not the ones thinking that we're going to solve the problem all by throwing bodies at it. So SecOps and AWS, now you're all done sleeping, lunch is digested, let's get to the good stuff. The approach you take is not a traditional data center approach. In fact, we've had multiple discussions today with people who have a generally higher level of maturity in the cloud than a majority of what I would say the customer base is at. And they've come back and taken a look and said, our initial approach of replicating some of the behaviors from the data center in the cloud didn't actually serve us better. It actually cost us more time and more resource than we should have been investing. And the challenge to that is exactly what we talked about earlier. We'll bring our host-based agent system over from the data center. That doesn't change that much. We'll bring our application security practice over from the data center. Once again, in the cloud, it's a relatively similar practice. What really changed is how you protect the infrastructure. The traditional perimeter model, 2 big firewalls, putting an IDS tap in the middle of your network and gathering all your data and just trunking that stuff right through a big box. Has anyone here called Amazon and been like, I'm shipping you a big IDS box from Tipping Point or something, I want you to stick it in the network? It's pretty comical. Their support people get really confused. But it's proving a point that in this shared economy, you've given up the accessibility to that physical infrastructure and the ability to do these common practices. And as such, you have to actually change the way you do things to adopt and get that same data from another output. If you wanted to get network traffic data, does anyone want to shout out the place you would go look for it first now in the cloud? See, logs, VPC flows, I heard a couple of things. The good answer is those are all right. Right? There's no one single source of everything. And what's exciting about the cloud and what's challenging in the cloud is you don't just tap into Amazon Security Service and pull down every piece of security data you need. It doesn't exist, right? You also don't go to an HP or a traditional provider that gives you technology or an IBM and say, give me a comprehensive feed of my cloud account infrastructure and give me the security report and I'll just go fix that stuff. This is a bit of a choose your own adventure, and that's why I brought that up earlier, in that everyone in here is going to do it a little differently, but the approach has to be the same. And the approach has to be understand the past, present, and future state of your infrastructure. And people will say, well, if I start today, how do I understand my past? You really don't. Like, that stuff's gone, and you're not getting it back, and that metadata is gone. What you can do is you can take your CloudTrail, your audit logs, or if the CloudTrail is not set up, then you're starting from today. And tomorrow you'll have historical data. Tomorrow you'll have past, right? It starts that easily. Present is easy. Present is, I do a query and I want to know what the state of everything is right now, and I take a snapshot. And I can do a number of things with that snapshot. I can do my typical by hand audit, which, by the way, most people start this way. Get a snapshot, go through, mark it up, and go back to the team and say, okay, here's the things we have to fix, or here's our corporate security policy, here's the stuff we kind of have to make compliant. Let's go resolve this first as like an opening salvo. And you're basically doing gap analysis on your security controls, right? What gets really exciting is now that you're gathering present data and that present data becomes past data really quickly, you're starting to build a baseline. And from the baseline, you can actually start doing things like predicted state analysis. If you look at the machine learning capabilities of Amazon service and Azure service and all these other interesting providers that are bringing them out, you can load these data sets and you can actually start figuring out where your hotspots are. Where do we fall down the most? What are the challenges we have, or what are we driving towards? I don't know if anyone in here is into automobile racing or motorcycles or anything like that, but kind of the rule of thumb is, past is this, present's this, looking at your speedometer and stuff, and future's looking up ahead of you. And the problem with past and present is you come up on a turn too fast and you crash if you're not thinking and looking ahead. So you have to build towards that. Doing present day security analysis is good for closing holes, but someone may already be in, or someone may know a hole that you don't even know exists. You always have to be afraid of the things you don't know that you don't know. The other interesting aspect that you have to think about here that you didn't do in the data center was you have to be able to actually have a query capability of this data. So you've gathered data. How do you interrogate the data to find out what's going on, and how do you leverage that for exactly what we talked about, incident response? You will not prevent incidents from happening. Anyone that sells you that is selling you baloney. What you can do is you can raise the bar for the type of attacker and the attack that succeeds, and then respond faster than anyone else in the industry. That response is driven by your ability to actually know what's going on in your environment, ask questions of the environmental data, and then make decisions to trigger incident response based on that data. So I'll use a good example. The biggest threat against your cloud infrastructure tends not to be the malicious mystery hacker from Anonymous or somebody out there on the internet that's trying to come in and steal all your cloud, right? Not happening. It tends to be people internally making mistakes and not catching them. And these are mistakes that are very much, if we're in a software-defined data center, these mistakes can be as simple as one parameter missing from a CloudFormation template. My S3 buckets that were all encrypted, when I create the new bucket for the next software release, none of that stuff's inheriting encryption from KMS or S3 SSE-backed encryption. One tick box. And if you have 15 developers that are all hands-on, it's not the days of the data center where you had one really smart firewall guy or one really smart data encryption specialist. They don't know what each other are doing at all times, and so there have to be some guardrails installed to make sure that when they're deploying things out there, when things go awry, you find out right away to respond, because I can tell you I've handled multiple incidents where customer data was lost and you don't know who got it, how long it was lost for. You can't even go back to the deployment framework and figure out when that change happened, because by then people have been doing CloudFormation templates on laptops, not all SCM'd. Like, this is kind of what happens when you move really fast. This ties directly into hooking the DevOps technologies, and the reason I asked the CI/CD question earlier is you hook the DevOps technologies, meaning your deployment system, your SCM, and your like chat ops, your incident management or case management system. If you hook these things to the security technology, all of a sudden you created a workflow. And sadly enough, as lame as workflows sound, they are probably one of the most powerful aspects of security operations, because if you get incidents and you don't do anything with them, it's a freaking waste of time. Right? You just generate a bunch of alerts and stuff happens. You go, cool, I have a dashboard, see ya. Like, the reality of it is we have so much more we have to do here, and we can't do it ourselves. Your DevOps teams and your product teams are taking responsibility for security by moving to the cloud. You have to help them by actually getting them the telemetry data to make smart decisions. Security is not primed as an industry for 3 to 5 minute response. You know who is? DevOps teams. They're used to server down, disk full, 500 errors on the application. When that pager goes off, they're like dead asleep, sitting straight up, already logged in, got their MFA token out, and they're fixing stuff. How powerful is having that as your best ally to do first-level security response? Because we're not asking them to go, decompile a malware bundle and figure out what's going on. We're asking them to go in and do things like, hey, it looks like an automated build pushed holes in our firewalls that we don't want to have happen. It looks like we pushed the wrong machine image out, and we have regressed 3 patch levels on our AMIs. That's a big deal when we have 1,000 AMIs out there. That's a lot of attack surface on a lot of IPs. I can tell you, anecdotally, doing some research ourselves, we've seen fully patched instances compromised in as little as 8 minutes. We catch cool O days because they come from all over the world, but that means if you don't have a strong infrastructure security practice around the machine images, and you don't have a strong, by the way, host agent presence as well, you end up in a situation where you can't stop that breach. You can respond to it, but you can't stop it. And then finally, where you're all here, you have to actually get to the point where you're automating response, because humans can't do it all. Minimizing response time is the name of the game. It's not stop everyone from getting in. It's once something bad happens, by the way, raise the bar for what it takes to get in, but then once someone actually motivated gets in, being able to detect, identify the patterns and behaviors, and respond. And in fact, automated response is part of it for containment and things like that. Humans will always be doing the forensic research. And in fact, humans will often do containment because you can't build a system so smart it can solve everything. So where the rubber meets the road, you guys will get tired of all the racing analogies if you can't tell what some of my hobbies are. Proud to say the CIS benchmark for Amazon infrastructure, the core one, was released a couple weeks ago. It's been a pretty good success. In fact, one of the things you'll see is CIS has brought one thing to the table that none of us individually could have done. It brought Amazon and Evident and a handful of other companies in the community and a handful of user organizations together to do a community-driven benchmark of security. Amazon has a preached benchmark saying these are kind of like the best practices from Amazon's side. Evident has something very similar to that. The CIS actually took from practice not only this set of benchmark industry controls that you can wrap around your infrastructure to have a baseline for security, but it was entirely built with automation in mind, meaning every single control will tell you how you can take steps to automate it. This is a phenomenal step forward. How many people here were aware of the CIS benchmark? Okay, only a handful. There are 2 things I want you to take away from this slide. The first one, like you can grab the foundation benchmark there, but go to Center for Internet Security's website. And if you want to participate, we are working on the 3-tier web architecture benchmark right now, and we will continue to develop additional benchmarks for various architectures. Please, please participate, because the community will build a better security standard for the community. It won't come from Amazon directly. It won't come from Evident. It won't come from any of the particular vendors, because those are all slightly slanted in view. What will happen is you'll get real-world examples of people making real, somewhat argumentative, but correct views of security and delivering them to the rest of the community to use. And I'll tell you now, not only is it clear and concise and somewhat prescriptive, but you get all the guidance to implement it, and it's going to have third-party support built into a lot of technologies. I'll tell you today, we're actually building the CIS support capability in so you can actually benchmark yourself. I know Splunk and some other partners are doing the same. It's vulcanizing the partner ecosystem, but it's also vulcanizing the cloud provider ecosystem. So let's say you take that CIS benchmark, and that's your opening salvo. We're going to do this, and we're going to leverage the automation that we get from that, and we're going to know at all times what our CIS scorecard looks like, right? So now we can judge, did we open a hole? Did we create an attack surface problem? Did we fail some critical controls in there? That's step one. That's the first step in your digital journey in security in the cloud, because a benchmark is cool, but it doesn't actually do more than score you on what it knows. So you have to think about all those ones and zeros that are being generated by your platform, right? Nobody here gets on a plane with a pilot who doesn't fly with the instruments. I don't know, maybe some of you are daredevils and like that. You need to have all the telemetry coming together about your environment. Not only the CIS benchmark, which is going to be a subset of that, but you need to have your CloudTrail logging. You need to have config CMDB change streams. You need to have inspector data. You need to have your web app scan data from Qualys or OWASP Zap or whatever you're happening to use. getting that telemetry data together in one place is the biggest challenge most organizations have. I'll tell you, when I had the slide earlier where it showed kind of like Elasticsearch and Splunk and Sumo Logic and things like that, that's where most telemetry data goes, but it's very reactive. So if you have a breach, you tend to go back there, or you have a security incident, you go back and kind of look it up and see what happened. It's not being used proactively. So this telemetry data you bring in includes that state data that we were talking about, right? And so earlier I made a statement that there is no single source of truth. I sort of lied a little bit. Personally, in my opinion, is the API is the single source of truth in every cloud provider. Because if you think about the model, the provider has a user-facing API, which might be front-ended by a UI or an SDK or whatever the interface is. You're sending structured security data, structured configuration data for your infrastructure, and defining what that looks like in this structured data set. And on the back end, Amazon's smart. They don't have people running over there and getting a printout from a dot matrix with all that and going and plugging in a server. No way. They're actually really smart in that they pick it up on the back end with automation, consume that data, and build you exactly what you asked for. How many people here would be using the cloud if like you asked for one thing and got something else, like the old swaparoo? Not very many people, right? That one-to-one relationship is that source of truth you need. So by consuming that API data, you're able to actually have a very good blueprint of what your infrastructure really looks like and who's doing what and how it changed. You can diff the two things from time to time if you have to. You need to layer that telemetry data with the audit sources, right? CloudTrail gives you a kind of who did what from where capability. That's super cool. That's like Clue, right? You know, Colonel Mustard did it with the candlestick in the library. That's kind of important stuff because if you figure out that someone caused a problem, but you can't identify the developer or the individual who did it, you can't help them get better. You're setting yourself up for more mistakes to happen. And then you're gonna bring in like the application and data infrastructure telemetry, the identities and policies you have, and then telemetry, again, you guys are gonna hear me use that word a lot. It's a new favorite word. You get CloudWatch and CloudWatch logs and CloudWatch events and all these other things that you can set up. So now you're actually getting all this relevant information about your infrastructure, how it's being used, the things that are happening in it. You can clearly see why people say my data center is like flying without that instrumentation, right? How many people can get all this data on their data center? The core challenge, and we'll go back to that first slide, or one of the first slides, there is no central control plane for your data center. If you want to tie all this together, you're going to play a game of merging APIs from 30 or 40 different security vendors into one. And now your business is not delivering customer joy and building cool products. It's managing other people's APIs, and that's a pretty terrible business to be in. By the way, this is step 2 if you are keeping track. Pitbull, not the cool Miami rapper guy, but point-in-time analysis. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Once you have the telemetry data, you can start doing PIT. I have point-in-time analysis. Here's where I am against my checklist or my security controls I want to measure. Do gap analysis. Once you do the gap analysis, you create a baseline. This baseline is actually based on data, meaning you have a whole bunch of point-in-time analysis slices, and you stack them like a big stack of pancakes, and you can say, hey, look, if I take a core sample of that, I can see exactly where the flaws in every pancake in that stack are and where they went away and when they came in the timeline. This is how we measure geological time on Earth, not a new concept. And then the fun part's behavioral analysis. This is the one where everyone's going to be like, tell me how to do this. I will not prescribe how to do this. I can tell you there are a lot of companies that their entire business is built around just this piece. I can also tell you that you have some extremely powerful tools in Amazon Web Services that can help you with this. Machine learning, you can use EMR to map reduce out a whole bunch of just event correlation. There's all kinds of really cool things you can do. But the idea is that now that you've got telemetry data, you can do these things with the telemetry. And if you can do them by hand, the next thing you can do is actually automate them. You can actually take these things and say, repeatable process, I know what my expectation is, codify it. This is exactly how we did Chef and Puppet and Ansible and Salt and all these kind of fun, back to CF Engine days, if any of you here felt that pain like I did. You really get to go in and say, this is my expected outcome or my expected end result. Anything other than this is a deviation. I want you to fire an alert, or I want you to create my desired end result. And by the way, this doesn't start with an out-of-the-box magic product. It doesn't exist. This starts with the old school way of doing it, good old scripts. You can do it in Bash, you can do it in Python, you can do it in Perl. The first thing you do is consume the data events, and then you start taking your security action on it. And once again, I cannot be prescriptive because everyone here is going to do it totally differently. And in fact, some of you will be like, SSH, open to the world, totally cool. I sell shells to people on the internet. And some of you will be like, SSH, open to the internet is catastrophe for my business. Number 3, the Spanish Inquisition. Anyone here that's a Monty Python fan? Get this. Querying data answers questions. I win obvious statement of the year. This is just like a no-brainer, but so many people miss this. If you can ask the data, hey, did anyone launch an unapproved server last month? Shoot, that could be in the last hour if you want. How many people can answer that question off the cuff today? I don't know if I see any hands going up. That means there's no evident customers in the room. That's as close to a product pitch as you guys get. The reality is you can't solve problems you don't know you have, right? Come on, button. There you go. Were any of our load balancers affected by the weak Diffie-Hellman key issue about 3 months ago? Anyone here know the answer to this effectively? A couple people do. Once again, if you don't know that there's a problem and you don't know which infrastructure is affected by it and you're cycling load balancers up and down and left and right, you have no consistent baseline to judge off of, right? And so when a deviation happens, you may not even know. You may not know you regressed a CloudFormation template that is now launching vulnerable load balancers. We have seen people accidentally but purposefully launch poodle vulnerable load balancers. Like seriously, like a well-known attack that's scripted and now scanning the entire internet. People are inadvertently launching them because they made a mistake. It's genuine. Is anyone here not moving at like the speed of light ×2, trying to get all your infrastructure and services out there? Everyone's going fast. We're all short people. We're all short on time. Automation is the only way to answer these questions. And really the ultimate question for all of you is, are we doing what we say we're doing? There's a lot of you here that sell service B2B and have contracts that say, we will do all these information security things. A lot of you may never see those contracts because it happens in the sales side of the house. But the reality is we're obligated by them. And in fact, if you're a regulated industry, you are committed to these. Or you get to meet like federal trade regulators and prison wardens and other fun things like that, which is really not where most of us want to be spending our time. And so this is where I'll get a little more prescriptive. No matter what you do, and no matter how much of this talk you observe, this is the slide that makes a difference. It's been all about make sure you're actually building a foundation for getting telemetry data, gather all of it, get it all holistically in, get it continuously, then you actually have to do something with it. This whole presentation is moot if you can't actually action any of the security alerts. We go back to alert fatigue. You will pass out cold from all the stuff coming in, and you will have a breach or an incident happen and totally miss it because you couldn't actually do anything on that data. If you can take this data, and we talk about DevOps teams, stick it in PagerDuty, that DevOps person that will get that alert will wake up, respond to it, triage it, send a report out, and go back to bed. They're the modern day firefighter. They will run into a blaze without even thinking twice and fix it for you. The best ally in security you're ever going to find. At the same time, you can actually page multiple people. Like I could say, high priority identity stuff goes to my CISO and my InfoSec team. High priority like instance and encryption, kind of like infrastructure level control, goes to my DevOps team. There's a different level of priority when someone's compromising identities versus someone's getting access to a server, for example. Because once an attacker has a foothold on the server, they still have to map their environment, find things to go do. Once someone has an identity that logs into the console for your Amazon cloud, you are in big trouble. There are many examples of how that's bad. Finally, the other one that's really interesting here is Lambda. How many Lambda users are in the house? Yeah, that's what we want to talk about. So when we talk about automated remediation, I will sit here and I could give you a 3-hour talk on Lambda remediation alone. This is the most powerful tool in Amazon's toolkit today. And if you're not using it, please look into it and start using it. The functions that you can create in Lambda and the IAM policies you can associate to it can create unique prescriptive actors on security controls. So if you have a remediation challenge, you say, this policy and this function will only remediate globally accessible ports on instances that we don't want to have happen, or even just improperly tagged or unapproved AMIs. Those remediations happen, and you guys see the alert come in on the periphery, right, or the email goes by and says, oh, we fixed this. You can open a JIRA ticket. You can do all these kinds of things that actually track it and create an ITSM compliant environment. But what happens is you didn't actually do anything, right? And now you can go back and say, look, I invested 4 hours in creating this function, tying this stuff together. I'm now going to save myself 100 hours a year of solving the same problem. I guarantee everyone in here has their top 5 repeat offender kind of issues they deal with. You fix those 5, guess what? There'll be 5 more tomorrow. But you're actually building momentum and building progress forward so that your guardrails and automated remediation capabilities are enforcing what you want to have happening. And when we talk about automating security operations, everyone came in here thinking maybe it's a monitoring talk. I'll tell you it's a remediation talk. It is about taking the telemetry data, which tons of people do, and it's making it actionable and then actually having it enforce what you want the cloud to be doing. That's the most important piece to take away. So we have a couple more slides. The reality is, and by the way, Minecraft fans, yay. Mine the data for the compliance needs, right? Who here is regulated, has any kind of PCI, ISO, SOC 2? Yeah, a bunch of you. The best thing you can do for an auditor, which seems like a totally backwards thing, it's like, giving the guy who stole your car a Christmas gift. The best thing you can do for them is take away their ability to ask you questions that aren't super intelligent about your infrastructure. So if you map and automate all of your compliance controls and then deliver them Amazon's NDA package on compliance, plus your CIS benchmark scorecard, plus all your custom controls you built and the telemetry data around that, they can go feast on that for a couple of days and come back and ask you 3 or 4 really pointed questions and then go away and recertify you. The cost savings on that alone is phenomenal, and I'll tell you, labor cost is not the big deal. The fact that you guys are stopping what you're doing mid-stride and pivoting and dealing with inbound audit requests and derailing all your efforts and working twice as long as you should have that week, that's the big deal. That has a human toll, that has a business toll, and ultimately, it's non-differentiated lifting, which is why we all went to the cloud in the first place, right? Ultimately, predictive security models and other key learnings come out of this, but really, this all starts with making sure we do what we say we're doing. I'm not going to read this to you. If you guys want to see us, you can come visit us at booth 101. You walk in, we're like the giant, obnoxious blue and white booth. Happy to talk to you guys about how we prescribe and do some of this stuff. But really, what we want to teach you is, 1, talk to everybody here. There's a motif here. Talk to us, and we'll connect you with our customers and our peers. Check out the blog. We try to publish some of the more leading edge material on kind of DevSecOps and do so with guest bloggers and people as well, your peers. But also, look around you, look to the people next to you, hand them business cards, introduce yourself. The worst case, you can poach somebody who gets it and add to your team. Best case, you make friends in the industry who you'll learn from. And the reality of that is you guys are all in this together. Doesn't matter what I say, doesn't matter what I do. You guys are all fighting this battle with me as a customer and as people in the cloud. So let's get on it. And reInvent 2016, really good parties. Take advantage of that. And I wanted to open it up for questioning. We left plenty of time. We have a microphone right up front here, or if you ask and I can hear it, I'll repeat it. That's it, no questions? You guys are so easy. This is always this, yeah.
What are some examples of maybe some kind of beginner Lambda functions that you're seeing folks use for security response that are some easy things to think about out of the gate?
Yep, so I'll tell you the 3 top ones we tend to see are enforcing IAM MFA being on. So people will actually go disable MFA so they can log into an account or change passwords and stuff like that. It's a terrible idea. Non-MFA credentials get phished and stolen at a tremendous clip in this industry because people realize as a criminal getting into a candy store and wanting to pig out, the cloud is a great place to go. You pay the bill, I can launch everything I want, and then if I get rid of everything and clean up my trail, you never know I was there, right? The second one is often very simple baseline stuff. Globally accessible ports for things. We had a blog recently about Shodan finding particular data mining cluster administrative interface that's just open on the internet. So if people don't set up credentials correctly, it ripped through Amazon and Google and Azure IP space because they're all published, and found several hundred exposed admin interfaces to big data clusters. That's a terrible problem. You should never have that exposed to anything but your corporate IP, and if that, usually you want to bastion and just do a shell through to do it. The third one tends to be, most of the time I find it around tagging. This is kind of a funny one. In security, cost control doesn't come up a lot, but you do want to know that things are tagged correctly so that the costs are associated correctly and you know who owns the thing. And if you know who owns the thing, then you know who to go talk to if it needs to be patched, if it's the wrong AMI, if it's out of date, if it's not tagged, for example. That tends to be the first three, and those are all really easy to do because they're really literally one API call, and we have some guys who have just knocked those out in Python in a few minutes. And then it goes deeper because your business will always have unique constraints that you want to ask your infrastructure or you want to fix yourself. And part of the reason I can't be prescriptive is because those might be good ones for some people, and some people might be like, oh, none of those will work for us. So, other questions? Yes? Oh, okay. The question was, how is the 1 million InfoSec professional shortage calculated? That is actually analyst numbers. Like all of the firms, Gartner, all these guys have agreed on this number years ago. Like it's not a new number. I just went and said, okay, let's just grab it and say, let's say that's the number and it's been flat since. I think that's false. I think that number is way worse. But it's not something a lot of people want to talk about because really it's kind of a scary thing when you think like we're doing more workloads, we have this explosion in workload and infrastructure happening, and we don't have enough people to secure what we had before. You know, the ramp is significant. Like we probably have 10 times more infrastructure today than we had a few years ago just because virtualization and software-defined network and data center has allowed this explosion. And when you think about assets in Amazon, if every server has its own IAM role and its own firewall policy and its own regionality and all that stuff, now you're talking about you have so many permutations of assets. I mean, S3 buckets have access rights and encryption policies that are unique. I mean, there's just too many permutations to keep track of, so humans can't do it. And I'm sure as all of you know, because you're here, finding people who are extremely well-versed in Amazon and security and automation, there's not a lot of those out there. You know, and so we have to kind of foster it in the industry, but there's no university pumping out InfoSec experts. It's just not happening. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Everyone asleep from lunch? Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. ISC2 is a great place to start. Cloud Security Alliance is another great one. You know, the thing that's interesting is, as you come into InfoSec, there's a very modern data center line of like, do your CISSP, do all this baseline stuff. And there's an emerging new baseline for the cloud world, which is the Cloud Security Alliance. And there are a bunch of people, and I'll tell you, it's slightly slanted on the vendor side because that's where a lot of the experts kind of said, there's a problem here, let's go start something. But they produce a lot of relevant material that's very vendor neutral, especially their reports, their cloud control matrix, those kinds of things. Great material to read, and it's free for individuals to jump in and contribute and read. They charge corporate membership, so if your company wants to be part of it, they charge you to get your logo on the website and all this. But that's really the best place. And then the one that no one talks about is you're sitting in it. Talk to a couple people, look around, find guys or someone in an evident shirt, a seat up, two up, and one to the left of you. You know, you can learn, and we'll give you resources, and we can help you find and connect to the right people. It's a really good business for you to be in career-wise. That's one of the unsoft touch things that you can't really, like soft skill things. Cloud security is here to stay. It's only getting harder. The more you invest in your personal understanding of it and your automation capability, the better you're going to be. You're going to have career opportunities and doors swing open. And we've had people talk to us that are like, I had no idea I changed my career trajectory just by doing what I loved. And it's true. Thank you. Other questions? The flight of an unladen swallow, next speed, anyone? Alrighty, thank you all. Appreciate you for coming. Any questions, come up and see me or grab us outside.